Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have our two lovely guests, Spacey, who's an INTP, and Cristian, who's an INFP. And today we'll be comparing and contrasting these two types. To start off, let's name off a few INTP philosophers and a few INFP philosophers. So, Spacey and Cristian, what are your thoughts on philosophers of these types?
I guess to start, I looked over it again briefly, and it seems like what you basically have is Parmenides, or however you say that.
Parmenides.
The so-called father of metaphysics was probably an INTP. And then what you have is kind of a slew of Greek philosophers that followed, like Plato, who I guess is widely agreed to be an INFJ.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't know if I agree with that, but maybe I feel like he's an extrovert, like maybe an ENFJ or an ENTP, but no, I don't know. Then you have Aristotle, who people say is an ENTJ. I thought all these guys were ENTPs, honestly, a lot of the early Greek philosophers, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have kind of fast forwarding to the 18th century maybe, or the 17th century starting maybe, the post-enlightenment thinkers who seem to by and large almost completely be INTPs, like John Locke and Descartes and Spinoza and Kant and all those guys, probably INTPs, Hegel, and then you have right after them, you seem to have a quite a handful of INFP philosophers like Kierkegaard and Camus. What the hell was his name? Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I'm a fan of. Probably some others.
Yeah. I do know, or at least I've seen, St. Augustine typed as an INFP. And so he's like a pre-enlightenment philosopher that I can think of that's an INFP, but I think that's pretty much it. And then you start getting to, once you start getting to like the 19th century and then onward, I think INFP philosophers start coming in. I think the most famous being Kierkegaard. And I think it's probably just because there was a move away from like this abstract rationalism and then towards a more like subjective philosophy. I mean, if you look at Kierkegaard, like his entire philosophy is predicated on just like the subject and like truth and subjectivity. So, so it becomes more about the individual than than some sort of abstract principle.
I guess it seems like you see INTPs kind of laying the groundwork for how people think in modern philosophy in general. And the FI seems to really create, more of like an existentialist, postmodernist kind of philosophy. That you see now.
Yeah. I think it's because it's. I know you've mentioned this before, Spacey. It's the cross-contextual versus just like contextual.
Right.
So like the existentialists and postmodernists don't like grand meta-narratives, which is very like TI. And I think there's a concern that like it obscures like individual narratives, and then it kind of like subsumes like a larger story, or smaller stories for a larger one, which is, I guess sort of erases the humanity of our existence. I know that Kierkegaard like fiercely disagreed with Hegel and his dialectic, which is like super TI, for people who are not familiar with
super TI.
Yeah, for people who are not familiar with Hegel's dialectic, he posited that like history like unfolds in some sort of like grand narrative, and then we can kind of like arrive at a final truth, like a teleology, and this happens through this process where it's like you have a thesis and you have an antithesis, and then those come together to become the synthesis, and that becomes like the new theory, and that's how history proceeds. And Hegel was using that to kind of like explain, it was like a theory of everything essentially before like Einstein's theory of relativity. And Kierkegaard was like, no. He's like, you're missing like that in each era, like there's a lot of differences. It's like context dependent. And so he was like arguing against that.
Okay. So there's like a universalist versus a subjectivist kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it seems like sometimes people run the risk of like kind of losing sight of like one side of things, and they'll kind of say that like the personal and the subjective and the context dependent is the only thing that matters.
Right.
Which seems a little weird to me. I feel like from the other perspective, it's hard to say that your perspective is the only perspective.
Right.
You know, because in its very essence, it kind of isn't individualistic.
Right. Right. I think that the postmodernists seem to be much more concerned about like phenomenology and subjectivity. Kierkegaard like acknowledged objective truth, and he thought that was important. I think you made a good point, Spacey, like that INTPs kind of set the foundation for how philosophy is like the framework in which people work within philosophy. And I think Kierkegaard took a lot of the frameworks from his predecessors, from Kant and even Hegel, but he critiqued them while still using them. So he thought objective knowledge was important, but he thought like what was important too was trying to find like your internal truth, like your subjective truth. He basically, and that's why like he really enjoyed like the Socratic method. And he was a big fan of Socrates because he thought that it was only by questioning yourself that you could get at like your true self, because he said that like humans are very prone to self-deception, and he was very concerned with like people following some sort of like massive social norm and like kind of not questioning things. So he was really like, it was really critical to him that like, you know, that people find their subjective truth, because that's how it determines how you live your life. So very, very INFP.
Well, no, I mean, I think Kierkegaard was brilliant, and a lot of similar early existentialist philosophers, many of them were probably INFPs. I think they acknowledged all of those things.
Right.
But it seems like, I guess as time went on, as you kind of move into like the mid 20th century, you start to see that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like it shifted, because like Kierkegaard was like, I felt he was in the middle. He acknowledged objective truth, but was really trying to push subjective truth as well, like equal to objective truth and knowledge. But then there was this like in the 1960s there was this huge shift with like postmodernism and then like critical theory, and then it was almost like there is no objective reality, which I don't subscribe to at all. It's like that's an odd thought to, like, I don't know. I guess you could. I mean,
it's a shame, because I even consider myself to be an idealist, and I definitely I wish I could figure out a way to make things the way that I think that they should be.
Agree.
And I don't know, sometimes people, they just I don't know if it's INFPs in particular who are susceptible to, when they're unhealthy or something, to be in this kind of a world where they can't allow themselves to let go of this ideal being a potential reality.
Yeah. So true.
And it turns into this warped, schizophrenic world sometimes, I guess. But I've been in a world like that myself.
Yeah. No, it's hard. I've kind of been in those situations. It's that I think a lot of it is the FI-SI loop, where that concretized like perfect ideal feels real, like, and so it's really, so then when you add the FI into that, where you have like this kind of like emotional or sentimental attachment to it, it's so hard to let go, and especially like when there's the fear that like when that ideal is put out in the real world that it'll
Right.
come crashing down. There's something
Well,
really
you can't risk it, which is part of why I think they love being academics, because then they get right.
So true.
Yeah, then they get to sit there and postulate. This could totally work, right? If I was the kind of person who actually implemented things.
I can't deny how true that is.
Yeah.
Because like sometimes
my job's just to come up with the ideas, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just think it's funny because like I follow a lot of academics on Twitter, and it's just like, man, you are so out of touch with reality, like just the things that you say, and so I just can't deny that feels welcoming to a lot of INFPs.
Right.
You just live in theory land forever.
I mean, yeah, I love theory land, but I don't know what it is about me. I don't know if it would be true of most INTPs. I don't feel like it would be, but I got a lot more satisfaction out of going to like vocational school and doing a shop class where I was actually learning how to wire stuff and like a skill that I could go use, right? Rather than waste a semester in this like gen ed course learning nothing.
It's true.
Like, you know.
I think it's definitely the TI thing, like, just thinking for yourself and not wanting other ideas or other like authority figures to impress their thinking or their way of doing things onto you. Whereas like, as an INFP, I have inferior TE, so like I'm more amenable to like looking to an authority figure, because I'm not confident in my own rational faculties and reasoning. Right. So like I'm more amenable to like looking to somebody who I think is smarter than me to teach me.
Well, I guess what I mean to say is that it's not necessarily doing things the way that I'm supposed to do them. It's like I feel like there has to be things have to be applicable. Like I can't allow myself to ever pretend like I know what I'm doing when I don't, or like I have to be able to like for example, people would tell me I was smart all the time growing up, right? Yeah. And I was like, well, if I'm so smart, why don't I have anything to show for it?
Okay.
Right? Why, if I'm so smart, why aren't I rich? It's like.
That's interesting.
And so I feel like I have this inbuilt thing, like where it's like I feel like I need evidence for things, but I don't know if it's necessarily empirical evidence, hard empirical evidence. But
right.
I have to see some kind of progress or some sign.
Yeah,
I'm on the right track.
Maybe it's like, I don't know. I see TI, especially TI DOMs, like doubting a lot, like questioning things. So maybe that's part of it, is like just not like, that's why maybe there has to be something more tangible, because like you have to, there's I guess some sort of doubt in just the knowledge itself, when it's not like, when you don't see like the fruit of it, I guess. I'm wondering if it's because TI really is more objective by comparison, but at the same time that clashes with the basic understanding that both TI and FI, for example, are supposed to be introverted subjective functions. Right. But I don't know. It seems like TI demands more of an objective thing. Yeah, I would say, like, so I saw Michael Pierce has a video, and I can't remember which one, but he has like a diagram showing like the different cognitive functions, and they're like on a spectrum or continuum from like left to right, and like the cognitive functions that are to the most left are closest to the subject, and then the ones that like either to the right or outside of the little head diagram that he has are like most far away from the subject. And I think TI, even though it's introverted, so he shows TI like inside the head, diagram, but it's kind of further to the right, so it's still subjective, but it's a little bit more removed from the subject.
Okay, I mean that makes sense.
Yeah.
You could also think about it this way. So I see both TE and TI, because they're thinking functions, there's a proclivity to want to systematize some sort of logic, but TI is trying to systematize a universal piece of logic, whereas like TE is systematizing outer world objects for the most resourcefulness. Mm-hmm. So it's like, because they have this ability to systematize or like understand things, like a system doesn't just have to be a practical operational system like TE. Like a system can also be just a fundamental system of understanding. And so I think like TI tries to get to that universal cloth. And so it's more objective in that sense, in the sense that it is logical and that it's impartial, but it's subjective, because the criteria is it's what passes through the self, and mm-hmm. anything that is filtered through the self becomes subjective because you're using a self filter to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Going back to what you said earlier, though, I would assume that FINE would create a similar doubting complex that TINE would create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I think that's why like INFPs in particular spend most of their life trying to figure out who they are and what their values are, because as NE gathers in more information, it starts putting it through the FI value system, and then there's this like comparison, like, does this fit me or does this not fit me? You know, and then if it does, you keep it. If it doesn't, then you update. So I think there's this kind of like doubting, like, because of the NE, really.
Well, exactly. It's the NE that seems to doubt.
That's true. I think that's probably it. Because TI and FI at some point want to come to a judgment or conclusion, but NE wants to keep things open. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like with NE DOMs, like ENFPs and ENTPs, they're the most doubting. Like they're so annoyingly doubting that everything they will throw doubt into. And
yeah. But
with like INTPs and INFPs, when they doubt, it's for their DI reason, for their JI reason, for their TI and FI. So with the INTP and the INFP, there's more purposeful doubting.
Right. Yeah. Like sometimes I do get annoyed with ENPs because they tend to doubt things almost just because they find it fun. And so sometimes I'm like, I'm done with the doubting. Can we just get to a point?
Yeah, it's like you were okay with this yesterday, and now you're doubting it. I'm like,
right. It's confusing sometimes.
So do you mean like their tendency to play devil's advocate, like that sort of thing?
Yeah, I guess so. Or just like, I guess constantly questioning everything. Just
it's like looking at something and going like, well, it also could be this, and it could be this, and it could be this, and they can't turn it off. So it's like this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I just get frustrated that they can't stay on the topic for very long.
Right. Yeah.
That's all. I mean, to me, like watching a lot of ENTPs, it's like you're just an INTP with extreme ADHD. I don't know how else to write.
That's true.
But
it can get frustrating because like sometimes like I want to like, you know, SI in detail a certain topic if I'm really interested in it, and they're like, no. And I'm like, wait, but I didn't finish analyzing this one part that I found really interesting. And they're like, next subject. I'm like, all right.
Well, I don't know. Most people don't try to wring as much juice out of every little conversation and experience that they have. And I think part of the reason we have to do that is because we're SE blind.
That's true. I'm not
such few experiences of actually getting out and engaged with stuff that
so
the ones
true.
that we do have, we have to just squeeze all of the meaning out of it.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I this is why I find like a sort of like bond with other INTPs or just INPs in general, because I feel like they understand that more than really anybody.
And then we'll even do that, you know, the JISI loop or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Where we will just basically, I mean, I guess you can call it a loop that you get into, but it's really just the process of just going back over the experiences that you've already had, seeing if you can wring any more juice out of them. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Oh man, yes.
Rather than just getting new ones.
and for the INFPs, like reinforcing their ideals, and that they go deeper and deeper into their idealized reality.
Well, that's the problem. The more you do that, the more attached you get to what you already know.
Yeah, it's a danger. It really is. And it's so hard to, like, you know, kind of you get lost in the caverns, as I like to say, and then you lose your way and you can't find the light, or don't know where to go to come up for air, which would be any. So yeah, it's very dangerous, slippery slope.
Well, I think really when you get down to it, though, it's like inside that cavern, you essentially know everything, right? Because you've gone over everything that you know 1,000,001 times, and you can't learn anything else from it. So you must know everything there is to know.
Right.
Right. But you never even seem to consider that there's actually just more stuff that you don't have yet. It's like
right. It's a curse.
Yeah.
It's a mental condition.
Yeah, it's like going over the precise details so much that you forget to go out. So guys, take your INPs out for fresh air. Give them a new experience.
Yeah.
Let them live life. Teach them YOLO, but not YOLO, safe YOLO.
Well, I mean, I don't know if INFPs feel this way, but sometimes I think INTPs can feel like kind of following from that process that we've kind of seen it all. That it's like, there's nothing that you could show me in the world now that would shock me or surprise me or get me thinking in a way that I've never thought before. I get that feeling a lot of the time. And I don't know if it's necessarily warranted, but...
No, I think I was actually talking about this with a friend the other day. I think for us INFPs, it's like people's behavior. There probably isn't like behavior that is not shocking to us, but it seems like it seems like for like high FE users, like they're surprised at certain like human behaviors, and it's like, we've seen it all essentially. Like I think just because like INFPs have this whole SI like so investigated every single detail of ourselves that like, and then we compare our experience to like the other human experiences, and we see these common patterns. So that's why like when like humans act a certain way, we're usually not surprised.
Well, it's interesting that you framed that as with human behaviors explicitly. I was thinking human behavior was one thing among many that I was thinking of when I was saying that.
Right. I know that you meant a wider range of experiences, but I was...
Well, it's true. It's true that I think both feeling functions are going to be focused on the interpersonal element.
Right.
And by the way, I think FI is it's a lot better at tracking how people really are across time.
Yeah.
It's more. It's like much more knowledgeable about people, I guess, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
FE like TE is really just all about efficacy.
Yeah.
It's what is the right thing to say to this person right now.
Right.
It's.
Yep. It's the breadth, not depth kind of thing. I mean, it's a little simplistic, but yeah.
Yeah. AJ Drenth, he has imagery for the functions, and he calls FI a dormant volcano, and then he calls FE a radiant sun. And so like, because like FE is focused on the utility of like social behavior and how to like utilize social behavior to enhance your bonds with other people. Like it's more about the dynamics between people sometimes. And while FI is trying to like relate to the humanness inside themselves in other people. So it's more of this in-depth searching within themselves to find and simulate another person's experience. So FI has this like maybe deeper type of feeling.
Well, I mean, what I love about it is that one begets the other. When you lead with FE, for example, and you're FI ignoring, the reason you're FI ignoring is because by employing FE well enough, you still end up developing deep relationships with people, and then kind of getting that FI knowledge about them, or that FI connection to them. You know what I'm saying? Or like if you're an FI lead, you're ignoring FE, but you're by paying such close attention to people's needs and values and the real person like within them and in all of its facets. If they appreciate that, right, then that is a suitable replacement for good FE, right, as far as your social standing.
I totally agree. Because like I'm very, very bad at social dynamics. Like I'm not like, I can't see social dynamics really at all. But like, I think what has helped me is knowing like myself so well that I can see like those behaviors reflected in other people, and then that's how I can like more individually understand how people are. But yeah, like so that makes up for the fact that like I really cannot see social hierarchies or social dynamics. I'm very kind of definitely blind in that area.
I mean, I guess to put it really simply, the FI DOMs are usually like, well, I'm actually pretty socially awkward, but at least if I'm really nice, then people can't hate me.
It's true.
Yeah.
I've had people literally say to me like, "You're so awkward. You're so like you're being socially awkward right now." I'm like, "Thanks."
It's just INFPs are usually just like almost disgustingly nice sometimes to me.
We are. No,
Yeah.
I've had the nice guy moniker pretty much my whole life. So.
But it's sometimes it almost seems like a defense mechanism. Like when I see my aunt doing it, but she's a hell of an INFP.
Disarming. We're
well, it's just kind of this thing where it's like I'm gonna smile, like letting you know that there's something I could say right now that I'm not going to say. You know, like that kind of thing.
Oh, like, I've had those many times.
Yeah. I'm just not going to say it and just smile, and nobody could ever think that I'm anything other than just perfectly nice and oblivious, right?
I think part of that is because like we know when we flip into ESTJ mode, like because of all like the personal stuff that we know about people, because people tend to open up to us, and just also we understand people on a very deep level. We know that if we flip into ESTJ mode, our TE will just like eviscerate somebody. So we just like we just smile. We're like
yeah, I guess we have a similar fear of jumping into ESFJ mode.
Right.
On the flip side.
Right.
We feel like we won't be able to control it if we let it out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of ESTJ and ESFJ mode, what are both of yours experiences with your inferior function? So your TE and your FE, your ESTJ and ESFJ mode. How does it differ, and how does it similar?
I'm trying to think of a good example of like my FE gone wrong. I think I just tend to like. Yeah, I do make just really cutting remarks to people. Or like shame them when I feel like they really, really deserve it. I just completely. This person needs to be taken down several notches in front of everybody, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's. I think for me it's definitely I get so frustrated that like. I will either like if it's with a person, I will either like tear into them and just like say everything that I'm feeling. Like I think you're stupid. I think you're a coward. You're this. You're that. and I'll just say how I really feel, or I'll just be like overly, I guess I'll be overly concerned with like that I'm being logical. So and then yeah, it's just pretty much those two things, I think. Overly concerned with being logical, and then like think people are like being super duper honest, tearing into people, or like trying to control a certain situation.
No, for me, I guess an example it would be like, I remember somebody like made some what I thought was like a really just kind of pointless critique of my behavior at the time, or some quality of mine, and I was just like, oh, sorry, I'm not perfect like you are. Like that kind of shit. Like I won't call people names, or it'll be like some passive aggressive or fighting thing like that.
Yeah, which is very FE. Yeah, where it's like right. My T is like very, very direct, and so it's very cutting. Yeah. So yeah, it's scary. I even scare myself sometimes because I'm like, I don't normally like going there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So it seems like there's like this trend between the both of you in the sense that it's normally some other person that has like an opinion that's wrong or harmful, and you either like want to like tell them it straight up, like what is the truth, or like what needs to be corrected, or because it's like, okay, like with JI, with TI and FI, what they are is it's the critiquing consensus opinion. So it's this part of them that doesn't automatically accept consensus, but has a desire to challenge it, or like this ability to, I don't know how to say it. It's like an opinion apart from consensus. Right. So like it seems like there's that in common with what you both were talking about. And so my question for you guys is, what are other differences that you notice between you two?
I guess for example, I have like way more any expression than most INTPs do. So like I like to just crack jokes and shit all the time. If I'm bored and not doing anything else, I'm cracking jokes. It's like
yeah, that sounds more ENTP.
Yeah,
definitely.
But that's, I don't know. I get, even as a TI dom, I get bored of TI, I guess. I'm really more interested in FI at the moment.
I think some of the differences that I've noticed, and I think, and I was watching the INTP panel, and I think, and Spacey, I think you mentioned this, but I want to say like the biggest difference is, well, there's a couple, but I think one of them is the whole rationalization thing. Like there seems to be like, I feel like INTPs have to rationalize their behavior about like what they're doing, and it's like post hoc. Whereas like I don't feel a need to rationalize my behavior. If I want, like, and especially if it's like understanding something. So I've noticed that INTPs, like, they feel a need to like explain themselves. Whereas like I will explain myself, but okay, so it's almost like I feel like INTPs, they explain themselves, not like it's like it's like both to explain themselves to somebody else, but also to try and convince themselves that what they're doing is rational.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me, like I will explain myself, but only so somebody understands. I think, Joyce, you've mentioned your ENFP friend is like this, like you have to understand. And so like I very much resonate with that. Like I will explain something so somebody understands, but not because like I want to like have a dialogue with somebody for them to like rationalize my behavior. It's just like, I need you to understand this, the end.
That's pretty on point. I mean, I will rationalize myself to other people. I mean, mostly just to avoid critique. It's like, okay, is this person probably going to critique me because they feel like that my intentions were immoral or something like that? So now I have to intercept and try to manage their perceptions, as bad as I might be at doing it.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
kind of what it comes down to.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Could that also be like the inferior FE too? So it's like
Yeah.
wants to manage its social image or like how people would view you. So it's like explaining it so then you wouldn't have your reputation destroyed or
It's like it's a very defensive manifestation of FE, I would say.
Yeah.
Like the thing I was talking about earlier, how I'll make like remarks to people like that. It's basically it's like the only time where it occurs to me to consider those things, right? Is if somebody decides that they're going to come at me and basically say you're hurting the tribe, right? You're being bad. So now I have to be like, well, okay, well, why don't you look at yourself in the fucking mirror first, right before you come at me telling me that I'm hurting the tribe, right? So then I'll get really upset when people start accusing me of being like immoral or mean or that kind of thing. When really inside I feel very altruistic and I like people a lot in general. And I try to do the right thing, almost to the point where I drive myself absolutely nuts. So it's like when people accuse me of that, it's like really serious.
Right. I think that's a good way of putting it. There's maybe an FE defensiveness where I think I don't want to say always because like FI or INFPs do care, but I think we probably care less about how somebody perceives us maybe than an INTP would.
Well, it's about how we perceive ourselves. The problem is we can't continue to justify perceiving ourselves as good people if everyone around us is saying that we're bad. That's the problem.
Oh, okay. No, that makes sense. Yeah,
right.
Because like we have like as an INFP, I think I and other INFPs have a more sure identity, like or confidence in our identity and who we are, because we view our identity as separate from other people, not always in relation to other people. So or how other people. Like our identity is not formed based on how other people see us. So I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah, and there's some things, the very few things that we actually feel completely certain about deep down that I won't budge on, and I know that I'm right. But obviously there's very few things like that where I feel like I know that I'm right.
Right.
And so I would say that in that sense we're not quite as bad as like an ENTP would be with third slot FE, where they literally almost seem to have absolutely no concept of whether they're doing right or wrong without feedback from other people.
Right.
So, I think that's how that kind of gets expressed.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
That is such a good point. Like the feedback to inform who you are is like super FE.
Yeah.
So like when people criticize you for not being caring enough, or like it hits you harder as an INTP because you're not certain in that, and that you trust, like there's a certain, like I don't know why, but people who have FE, it's almost like the feedback that someone has about who you are is it feels so big in your mind and you can't help it, like because you don't like you aren't the one. I don't know how to explain it, but you hit the marker on the head, Spacey, that it's almost like people who have FE look at the collective to kind of like gauge their worth, and so it can be hard hitting when they accuse you of not being caring, because it's almost like you believe them because your natural instinct is to actually like put some weight into that, and so the TI user has to be on a defensive stance because it's like, whoa, it'll get to me if I am not defensive, because yeah.
Totally.
Well, and it's weird because we, as INTPs at least, we're actually frequently engaged in very heavy, complicated moral and ethical analysis of things, which a lot of people might not. A lot of times, like morals and ethics gets associated with FI, but I feel like it, in at least one way, we are heavily analyzing things from an ethical perspective to make sure that what we're doing is like morally right and isn't hurting people.
Right. I think Yeah, maybe TI is a little bit more detached in that analysis, like
Right.
whereas FI, like myself, might be more inclined to insert myself as an individual within that like ethical analysis.
That's so true. Spacey called his TI disinterested calculus. So I
Well,
think that's
that
something.
I ripped that from Eric actually. He has good names for things.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe FI wouldn't relate to that because, like, would you relate to being called like your dominant process being called disinterested, Christian?
No, I mean it like it's hard for me to do something like without having myself like acknowledged in that process, like without me being in the center of that analysis. So especially if it's like it depends, of course, like if it's about like values and ethics that are personal to me, like I can't do that detached. I have to see where I fit in with that within that within that ethical or value paradigm. If it's something that like I don't know, like I'm really interested in studying comparative politics, like I can do that in a dispassionate way. Um, but uh, um, but when it comes to other like stuff like that, that's important to FI. Like I can't remove myself from that. It's too difficult. I
That's fast.
sometimes I don't even know how to conceptualize how I would remove myself from that because like I think FI actually I think sometimes I myself get frustrated because I like sometimes some INTPs, not all, but some INTPs act like they are totally dispassionate in their analysis and they have no bias, and it's like no, like like we're humans and we like bias is going to creep in, and so like I get frustrated with that sometimes. Not all INTPs, like maybe the more unhealthy ones, but that's why I'm like I don't. Sometimes it's even hard for me to conceptualize how I could be dispassionate in something like that. I mean, I think there's a continuum more or less, but I don't think you can be completely removed from that. So yeah,
That's exactly it. The thing is that INTPs, as much as any human being can be, are built from the ground up to be unbiased. However, as human beings, we're definitely still biased all the time, and some people just I think really internalize that INTP archetype
right.
and think that's what they really are.
Interesting. So, yeah, I completely agree with both of your points. And so, Christian, I have or to both of you, if you want to answer this too. So, if TI is disinterested calculus, then what would be the parallel for FI?
It would be I don't know personalized analysis, um, subjective meaning discovery, something like that.
Yeah, I would say personal would probably be the opposite of that. But Auburn over at Cognitive Type, he used biotic and abiotic to describe them, which I thought was a very interesting dynamic to consider.
Say more.
It kind of like he seems to perceive FI as being like more of a more almost grounded in your animal biology and in like your limbic system. Whereas TI is not. It's not as attached to your bodily impulses, I guess.
I could see that because FI is like described as being like intimately familiar with the subject's needs and wants and desires.
Well, I think it's a factor of FI actually making use of the emotional register in the limbic system to analyze things.
Right.
So it has to have that connection, which can be a blessing and a curse.
Yes, there's there's definitely some downsides to that.
But it definitely seems like a huge difference is that TI DOMs definitely we want to withdraw, or at least INTPs do. We want to withdraw in spirit from pretty much everything. And it seems like FI does not give you that impulse to withdraw.
Yeah, it really it sort of depends, I guess. Like we have this like I think especially INFPs, I think we have this like push-pull, and especially like if you factor in like Enneagram, like if you're a 4 like I am, like there is a push-pull where it's like you have like this this deep desire for like a human connection with somebody, but the emotions are so powerful and overwhelming that like it's like when you get that intimate with somebody, and it could be anybody, like you start to like kind of absorb their stuff too.
You're permeable.
Yes, there's a great website. I can't remember, and they described FI as this permeable membrane, and
Right.
it blew my mind hole open. I was like, this is exactly how FI feels, because like it does feel that way. Like and so that's why there's this attraction repulsion. So like we attract good vibes when there's the strong connection with somebody, but because it's so permeable, we're also attracting other people's like negative stuff too. So then there's like this repulsion to want to like expel all that negative stuff out of our spirit or our being. And so this is where we have to go into withdrawing mode, and in order to like recover, because the feeling is sometimes so intense, it's very visceral, and it's happened to me quite a bit. So yeah, there's this. It's really difficult sometimes. It's push-pull.
You may have actually found Auburn's website because he described it that way.
I think
part of the article.
Yeah, I think I think it's like cognitive.
Yeah, cognitivetype.com. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. No, I love his website and just
great description.
It's so good, and I just so resonated with that. Like it just something clicked when he said that FI was permeable. This permeable membrane. I was like, yes.
That's a good way to visualize it, I think. TI is more of like a hard barrier that every now and then they'll be like, oh, okay, you can get in.
Right.
And then it's closed again. And then you're like a permeable membrane kind of all the time.
Yep.
And it seems like, I guess at core you don't want to withdraw, but then you kind of develop this fear of pain, like it's sticking your hand in a fire or something.
Yes.
And then you want to retract.
Yeah. And there's also like a fear of like losing yourself, that the feeling, other people's feelings get mixed up in your own, and you like don't want that, because you still want to preserve yourself. So then that's also why I think there's this repulsion as well.
That's funny, because I kind of have this opposite feeling of having no self. There's no right. What self? Why does that matter? Right.
Exactly. What
and
is
I'm like, look at these pitiful people clinging to their egos,
Exactly.
I don't know. It's not really like that, but
I know. I get what you mean.
Yeah. I don't know. I like I said all the time, I'm really big about not allowing myself to get emotionally attached to anything that is not a living organism.
Yeah.
And that's how we operate. That's how you do. That's what disinterested calculus is. This is an idea, right? It's not a person. I don't have to get emotionally attached to it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the problem. I was just talking with an INTP friend of mine the other day. He's like, you INFPs really get like very like attached to certain ideas. I'm like, yes, we do, unfortunately. And because it's like because I think maybe it's because like we put in the time to generate that idea, so it definitely feels like from us. And again, because like we don't know how to remove ourselves from the center of that like analysis or that like idea generation, like we can't remove the I, or it's very difficult to, then like that's why like it feels so personal to us, like our ideas. And so when they're attacked, like we really take it personally.
Well, I think again it's an important part of an INFP's function to care so much about their ideas.
Yeah, I guess.
Because if they didn't, they would probably literally never ever get implemented. And every now and then, obviously, you guys have a really, really good idea that needs to be implemented.
Yeah,
like we do.
it's true.
It seems like INFPs throughout history are frequently like political revolutionaries, stuff along those lines. Making big sweeping changes every now and then.
Yeah, like one comes to mind. Apparently, he's an INFP, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. You know, I mean, a lot of social contract theory, or at least one version of it comes from his philosophy. A lot of revolutionaries have used his ideas. So it's yeah. When we get around to it, of course, when we get around to our TE.
Yeah.
Yeah, the FI-TE axis is known as goals and dreams. So in a certain level, like FI has to be passionate about the self and the self causes, because it's like a dream for the TE goals to aim for. So
Right.
that's how like the axis works. And I guess another comparison you guys can make between like TI and FI is that like FI is passionate about the self, TI is indifferent to the self. And this is because like FI is passionate about what the FI is passionate about. And like the TI is, it wants to get out as much bias as it can from its logic. So there's an indifference to everything, even itself, while it's coming up with its rationalization. Values can come after, but it's like when it's logically forming something, it is like, you know, what Spacey said, withdrawing from the spirit of things so you can get to the most logical axiom or universal axiom.
Right.
For me, that even makes it hard to figure out simple things like what do I like?
Yeah, it's so interesting because like one of my good friends is an INTP, and like he struggles with this constantly. Like he's like, I don't know like what the limits are of like what my needs are, and then what I should be doing, or like what I can't handle. Like kind of like I don't know where like the limits are of what I can do, and then what I'm just like I'm being a baby about, for example. Like, and so like, am I not doing this thing because I literally like physically can't do it, or because I'm just being a big baby? And it's just like, and I find that so like difficult to conceive, and also frustrating as his friend, because he is very, very like he has a very difficult time setting boundaries, and like I've noticed this with the INTPs is that like sometimes they tend to push themselves past what is maybe healthy, and then they end up suffering for it. And so and it's just like I try to say like, no, like if you like, but what about what you need? And then it's like, you know, like what about your needs? Like aren't those important? And then there's this kind of like sort of like repulsion, like what? Like my needs, like I'm detached from that stuff. Like I have to think about it in a dispassionate way. And I'm like, no, but like how can you do anything if you don't take your needs into consideration? And it's like, but why? And I just like, it's so, this is where like I think like FI and TI like, or and at least INFPs and INTPs can get tripped up, especially like maybe in friendships, like because it's just something that's so foreign to each person. Yeah.
No, I can totally relate to that. It's, I guess for us, like it kind of takes you to that that rights versus responsibilities dynamic, where it's
so
like
frustrating.
Yeah, like for us, it's like it's kind of responsibilities. It's like, okay, what are all the things that I feel like I absolutely have to get done, and I have to do them. And it doesn't matter if I actually have to do all these things. That's the way that I feel, because I'm basically worried that other people, again, are going to judge me and say that I'm being lazy, or I'm not contributing enough, right, to the tribe, or that kind of thing. And I have to stave that off. I have to work hard enough so that nobody can ever accuse me of being lazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the obligation thing. This like right. I've noticed that like INTPs like as their top principle, like maybe more than freedom and individuality, it's like obligation, and I just do not understand that concept.
No, we cannot be indebted to people. That's what it is. We can't owe people anything, or be we can't be in the red.
It drives me insane.
I would argue that the obligation component might be linked a bit to FE too.
Yeah.
Because like, okay, FE has a bit of social obligation. It's like your social duty, or like that, like, because it knows what it needs to maintain the relationships around you. And so sometimes it can view these things as like obligations too. They might not say it like that way, but from talking to some FE users, they tend to see it that way. So it could be a bit from that too.
Yeah. And I think that like kind of like tying this a little bit back to our earlier discussion about philosophers, like I think this reminds me of the difference between Kant's categorical imperatives and Kierkegaard's philosophy. So like Kant is like, there are these certain like categorical like principles or obligations that one must do regardless of how they personally feel about it.
Yeah, very TI dom shit.
Yeah, but like if it just so happens that it's in alignment with your personal values, all the better. But Kierkegaard is like, no, because like, and he does argue against Kant and his categorical imperatives, and he, because it's focused, he's focused on the subject and individual authenticity. That sort of kind of categorical imperative or obligation is antithetical to like being authentically yourself. So I think that kind of nicely illustrates the difference.
It does, actually.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about like kind of first and eighth slot TI, FI.
Yeah.
Because I guess first of all, what needs to be said is that like INTPs, for example, actually have much better FI development than you might think that we do, and vice versa for INFPs with TI.
Yeah, I've actually been really impressed because I think there is some shading or overlapping between principles and values. So, and I think the process by which we respectively come to our values or principles is a similar logical process, except like TI's more dispassionate. But I've read, and I think for personal experience of like the process of how you like get to your values seems very TI to me, at least for like INFPs. And also another interesting thing I've noticed is that Dario Nardi has a personality test. And if you take it, it shows like the percentages of cognitive functions that you use, and it does all 8. And it's so interesting because like a lot of INFPs that I know who have taken his test have gotten a higher percentage of TI than TE, but are still typed as INFPs. I don't know if it's just because of how he words how he words the questions that have to deal with TI, and it sounds so similar to FI that like, INFPs answer that way. But I do find that interesting, and I think I've seen that also with INTPs in the reverse. Well, they'll get a higher percentage of FI than they do FE.
Yeah, I'll see that with basically any type. Their 8th function will probably score higher than their 4th.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess that's just a factor of like here, for example, just being really good at introverted judging in general.
Right.
I guess. I don't know if that's a thing, but I'll say the way that the role functions kind of manifest is what I think makes it really easy to confuse our two types. So you can see a lot of INFPs where it's like 95% of the time they're talking, you could almost confuse it for TI because they're very articulate and they sound very knowledgeable about what they're saying and that kind of thing.
Right.
So
totally,
especially male INFPs. They'll
get
confused for INTPs left and right.
Yeah, like it's interesting. I definitely I think that's why I connect so much with INTPs is because we tend to have I definitely like all the emotional artsy-fartsy stuff, the creative stuff, art and architecture, but like a lot of the things that like I'm more interested in are definitely topics that are that INTPs also tend to be interested in. So like I definitely, like for example, like I want to study in grad school. I'd like to study political institutions in other countries, and there's definitely kind of a there's an abstract quality to it. There's sort of like a TI aspect of institutional theory building. And that stuff is like really fascinating to me. And I think that's actually why I wanted to go into academia, because I was also considering going into policy, but policy is more like TE. So it's taking like the theory and it's like applying it in the real world. Like, how do we take these like theoretical concepts that we get from academia and we apply it to specific like real world policies, and that didn't seem very interesting to me. I like the theory building of just kind of getting into the abstract. So I think that could probably make me look more INTP, but I definitely am an INFP.
Well, no, and I see INFPs frequently engaged in theory crafting, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how I can say that TI is really any more theoretical than FI is. I guess you could say, if you wanted to make finer distinctions, that FI is maybe a little more fantastical.
Yeah,
than
I would agree with that. Yeah, I honestly like TI and FI Dom especially, like, and just they're so similar. Like I feel, like I said, like I feel sort of like a fraternity with INTPs. I'm more emotional than them, but like in certain respects. But like I think on even just existentially, I think we just really get each other on a very deep level of just like what it feels like to move awkwardly through this world and just kind of not feeling fit in. I think that's why we're sort of like we're sort of simpatico with each other, because like we feel like misfits, and like our the things that we like are just so impractical. Like they just are not, like, this world just does not seem fit for like the kinds of things that we're interested or passionate about. And so I think we kind of like we bond in like this kind of suffering like,
for sure, we commiserate over our mutual depression all the time.
Absolutely. And so that's why I enjoy having INTPs in my life.
Yeah, I like INFPs. I think my one friend is actually an INFP, but he's really into stocks though, day trading. He really flexes his TE, but I
wow.
And I guess I want to say INTPs with role FI, I guess it's probably normally harder to confuse one of us for an INFP than the other way around.
Yeah.
However, when we get to a point where we are actually fully contemplating other people's unique perspectives and how someone might have possibly arrived at that perspective, what happened in their life, what was their home life like, all these things, how does someone arrive at thinking this way?
Right.
And over time, I think we can start to actually be really, really good at just hearing people out and not actually bothering to correct them or anything, and just kind of, oh, that's interesting,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of where FI comes in for us a little bit, and I think we both have something to prove with our role functions, basically. INFPs have to prove that they can actually, the way that they feel bears out logically in a way that you can explain to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that's why they appear the way that they do. That's why they get so good at articulating themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Joyce has mentioned this too. Like, I think we are so sensitive to like being misunderstood and saying that like our feelings are invalid or like they're not logical, whatever, that we feel like we have to put in like 20 times more effort just to like learn how to articulate and like make some sort of logical sense. So there's absolutely some like there's an incentive to prove that. And but kind of going what you're saying a little bit earlier, like I really one of the things I really like about like my INTP friend is that like that I think that he does have a really great understanding of like, because I've opened myself up, that he has a good understanding of me and where I come from, and so he's just really good with just like kind of sitting with me and not like correcting me or saying this is wrong or trying to like make me feel better, like, oh, it's okay, things will get better. But like he's just really good, and I think INTPs are just in general good at just like kind of like I think both of you, like both INFPs and INTPs, like I think can make good friendships, because I think they're both good at like just sitting with that person in that moment and just allowing them to be.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of times where I basically played therapist with my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, sitting in the car. Yeah, but we're both types that really just want to understand.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. Like, it's so true. Like, it's so funny. And that, again, another reason why I connect so well with INTPs. It's like at the core of us, like we just really want to understand things. Like, we just want to be like knowledgeable about whatever it is, you know.
Well, and when you get to a point where it's like, for me, or I think any INTP has to kind of get to this point where it's like, well, it may not seem logical, but I guess it's true, right? I'm not going to try to explain this, and that's part of the FI integration process. I think where I think it's when we realize that FI data that we would frequently ignore, we realize that even if it is completely irrational, right, and makes no sense to us, right, it is still data that has to be collected and analyzed and worked into our existing models in order for us to understand what is going on, including all the irrational stuff that happens or whatever.
Yes.
It has to be part of your TI model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It reminds me of the saying, like, feelings are not facts, but they can be data. They are data.
Exactly.
So like, so like learning about that distinction. And I think like for INFPs, like I kind of like recognizing that too, like, and trying to like implement some sort of like TI structure on our feelings, that they're not necessarily true, but they are good data, and that's okay. And then like, it just helps. But as long as we can like use the TI framework to construct the logic of our feelings, then I think that's how like INFPs can integrate our TI.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And I think at the end of the day, that ends up tying into your fourth function too, because when I am trying to explain things to people, now I have things like 6-slot NI and 8-slot FI kicking in to do things like considering this person's current emotional state and what they currently believe. I learned how to say just the right things to people in just the right ways, considering a variety of factors, and also at just the right time when they're feeling just the right way.
Right.
So you have just the maximal impact so that they're actually listening to you.
Right, right.
And that's one of the things that I actually need FI for, to actually have good FE, so that I know how to speak to people.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think, you could say the same thing for INFPs, and like just making sure that like for TE, like the data that we are using, like logically makes sense, and so that way when you execute it in the real world, that it'll work out.
Well, I think really for you, it's making sure that you actually understand it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times you can go from FI to TE without actually fully understanding what's going on.
That's true. That's very true. Because TE wants to be efficient, so it just takes in the data really quickly and then like makes a quick FI judgment, and then so like the TE could be used to like kind of break things down and really analyze that stuff, or analyze what it is that you're looking at, and I think that's how that could be useful.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think I have to sometimes prove to people myself that, like if I'm talking to a sensitive INFP, for example, probably a lot more sensitive than you are, sometimes I have to be really careful to make sure that using my role FI, right, that it's very clear that, okay, I understand your perspective on things. I've considered all these perspectives, and even so, even though it might sound a little harsh and it might sound a little cold, I'm still right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I appreciate that, because like some, like if some INTPs who haven't like really integrated FI as much, they can just kind of question you without like prefacing it in that way. So it's just like, well, I don't get it. That doesn't make sense to me. That's not logical. As opposed to like I can see why you would think that, but like, do you really think that that makes sense to you? Like something like that, you know, where it's just like, let's hard.
It's the sort of thing where like people think that kind of because I end up kind of deciding on a more TI-ish looking perspective, they think that I just ignored the FI perspective. When I really tried hard to consider it, but I didn't think that it bore enough weight, sort of.
Yeah.
You know? And that's a thing where obviously as a TI Dom, you're usually going to decide that if the two are clashing, that's really what it comes down to. You can use both very well, but at the end of the day, if FI and TI conflict, that's where you're really going to see the difference between an INFP and an INTP.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you see that a lot in the context of political discussion all the time now.
Oh, interesting. You see, like, I'm wondering, because I don't know like too many other INFP's political views, but like, what's funny is like I'm libertarian, or classical liberal, which is fairly like, at least like the philosophical part of libertarianism is very TI principle based. So that's kind of actually how I practice my TI, is like trying to go from like a theory of the state of nature to like how do we get like rights. so I can see though like what with some INFPs might be like of a more social justice bent type thing.
I mean, yeah, I think you see that side of the political spectrum is hugely populated by NFPs from what I can.
Yeah.
But I honestly, to me, it's actually whatever political views the respective INTP and INFP have is almost irrelevant, because as long as the two are having a political debate, I think you'll see how TI and FI can butt heads.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is what I mean to say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you can even have an INFP conservative and you know an INTP progressive or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think it, especially with the because I think like INFPs will pull in like TE more, so they'll like more cite data as opposed to trying to like logically reason something.
Right.
So like that's something I've noticed. Like I'll be like, this study says this, you know, so like therefore I'm right, you know.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like, everybody's got a study they can point to. That's
right.
You know, you believe it. There's a study that supports it.
That's true. Absolutely.
But I've definitely had conversations with like INFPs, for example, who are like, you know, they're in college and they're like self-styled socialists.
Yeah.
And it's like. And I'll be trying to talk to them about it, and they won't want to reason with me, like you said. What they'll say normally is something like, "Have you even read like Emma Goldman's book?" Right?
Yes, citing an authority.
And I'll be like, "Well, have you? Because you can't seem to explain right their thesis to me, right?" So
right.
It's like.
This is the problem where like when INFPs have not really like integrated the role function because like they don't know how to articulate like maybe as well an argument that they've read, so they have to use that like, have you read this, because they're hoping that like the other person has, so they won't have to articulate it because they can't really themselves. That's
another thing I've noticed. I do not venerate people just because they like. Just because you were in the 1800s doesn't mean you get any respect from me. Like,
I have, you know? Yeah, that's a definite me thing. Like, I'll be like, this person has a PhD. I totally believe you.
I don't. No, like I don't actually care about PhDs. I don't care. I literally, if I talk to you, I will be able to determine whether you know what you're talking about, and whether I should respect you or not. And title. Race, creed, I just can't. It doesn't matter. It's
right.
Doesn't matter for me. In fact, if you have some pompous title that you're waving around, I'm likely to start off with a negative bias.
Right. I think this like goes back to like what we have to prove, because like the title for us, and I can speak from my own personal experience. Like I've felt like incompetent in my own knowledge, because like I don't have, because I have roll TI. So like I felt incompetent in like my knowledge and how like to articulate my own arguments. And so then like that, it incentivizes me to like want to TE, like get some sort of credential to say like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. It's like sort of like,
it's a perfect mirror of how I don't know that I'm a good person, right? Unless other people tell me.
That's a great point. Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Only the TE version. I got you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's just like we have to prove ourselves. It's like, say we have this PhD, means we know what we're talking about, so we don't have to like actually explain what we're saying, because we're afraid that if we do explain it, it'll open up for critique, and then we'll think that like we're not as smart as we thought we were, or something like that. Yeah,
it's true. We're the TI DOMs. We're like way more. As long as we know that we know, it doesn't matter. Like we don't. I don't even care if I look like an idiot to people, and I'm sure I do.
Right.
People see me in public and they have no idea that I am remotely intelligent. Like it's kind of hilarious. But I don't care, because I know what I know.
Right. That's I like that.
I don't have anything to prove about it, and I've realized that there may actually be a lot of like mistyped ISFJs, for example, maybe that think they're INTPs, who actually have a spot TI, and they have a huge ego attachment to not being wrong in front of people ever.
Right.
Whereas, I don't know, I guess I'm not quite so worried about making a fool out of myself exactly. As long as I'm learning and I come out knowing the truth, I may have lost a lot of face along the way, but at least I got somewhere.
Yeah, I love that like parallel, like that really tracks nicely the identity and the competency for us INFPs. It's like totally makes sense.
So that's good. So INTPs, we have to let people know that we're nice, because they can't tell. Basically.
And we have to let people know that we're actually smart and we can be logical.
We have to. It's funny. I end up having to rely on like a lot of flowery language to like really demonstrate to people that I care. It's like it's hard for me to like fake an expression on my face or something. So it's like, I want you to know that I really deeply appreciate. Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. The insights have been plentiful and have been wonderful. So thank you guys. And I think that, wraps up this this wonderful talk that we're having. And so thank you, Spacey and Cristian, for coming out and discussing the differences between INTP and INFP. I really feel like we got to the depths of this topic, and you guys are so knowledgeable, insightful, competent, and good people. And it was great to have you guys on. If you guys don't already know, Spacey has his own YouTube channel that I'll link below, and I'll link Cristian's Twitter account below as well. And these guys are just wonderful. They're like solid people, solid Samaritans of the human species. And so, yeah, if you want to see more of their wonderful faces, their fantastic souls, they're linked below. And so thank you for coming on and being so wise about your own self. And, your ability to look into your own process has enriched all of the audience members. So, thank you for just having your wonderful abilities of articulating your process, because it's benefiting people. And you're really making a difference.
Yeah. I think this was a good one.
Yeah.
It was the particular combination of types or the particular combination of people. But
I think it was both. Honestly, I really enjoy this, and I think it also could be the people too, because like when I was watching the INTP panel, like I was like, Spacey seems cool. I feel like I could get along with him.
Try to be cool. Anyway, honestly, when I was like 19 or whatever, I was not cool. I've come a long way.
I think I really liked the stuff that like you said. I think you're just very insightful. So yeah, I think.
Well, we try to offer insights, and I think that might actually be a demonstrative NI thing too. That's what we're here for. We do the thinking and then give you a nice packaged insight just for you. You didn't have to do any of that thinking. All I have to do is give you this one line, and you'll understand everything.
Yeah, for us, it's just about the human experience, an insight into the human experience packaged in an NI insight.
Yeah, and it must be Christmas because there's so many packaged insights in this video. So thank you. I really.
Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, I hope that you guys really enjoyed these, two commendable and admirable human beings right here. And I'll see you guys next week. So bye, y'all. Bye. Thank you.